Thank you all for hosting me this morning at this amazing conference. It's an honor to be here today. And it's the 4th of May, so I can't start without saying, may the 4th be with you. It's, I love that. I love the Star Wars trilogy. They're well beyond a trilogy now. One of the things that I really like about science fiction and the writers behind great episodics like Star Wars is the creativity and imagination that they have. When George Lucas wrote Star Wars in 75, 76, so much of what he imagined was not even conceivable. And 40 years later, we're walking around talking into our phones, whole sessions on artificial intelligence and machine learning. We're interacting with holograms. You have someone like Elon Musk sending a Tesla on the tip of a rocket over to Mars. That ability to imagine, to believe, to step out of the realm of the current is something that I know all of you share. You wouldn't be in Silicon Valley and wouldn't be in the audience if you didn't. And definitely is the core foundation of why I got into high tech and the basis and beginning of actually my childhood and life. So I'm gonna go through 3 chapters today. A short chapter on my background and how did I get into high tech, a little bit on the data revolution that we're going through right now and the opportunities in front of us, and then a little bit on Splunk. I would be very sad if I didn't leave you guys with something like a petabyte is a terrible thing to waste, and the impact that Splunk is making on some of the organizations around us. So starting with my youth, I was lucky enough to have a mom that from the very, very early days, as early as I can remember, constantly told me that I could do anything that I put my mind to, that there should be no limits for whatever any of us wanted to do, and certainly not for me if I was willing to believe and work hard enough. She also taught me to question everything. I know she later regretted that because every request that she made of me would have a 5-minute debate on whether it was a logical request or not and whether I should actually follow whether I had to eat my vegetables with dinner, whatever simple thing that she put in front of me. While those were the highlights, a little bit more challenging was her wanderlust. We moved 11 times before I got in 8th grade. I showed up in Northern California as a 13-year-old, and virtually every single year, I was in a different school. And many years, I would switch schools halfway through the year. And that taught me a few key valuable lessons. Change is a constant, and it certainly is a constant in our industry. And all I could focus on is what can I actually control? How do you roll with the change and then control the few levers that you actually have some degree of influence over? And for me, there were 3 things that I wound up centering on. One was my room. Every move that we did, my room would be unpacked within 24 hours. I'd have my posters on the wall. My clothes would be organized in the closet, literally by color, by shirt sleeve, by season. My albums were neatly stacked by alphabetical order so I could find whatever cool record I was trying to listen to. The second was school. It's easier to adjust if you have the support of your teachers. So very early, I'd work my butt off and somehow always found a way to be towards the top of the class, if not the top of the class. And for me, in the 70s and 80s, the third was sports. When you show up as a new kid in different parts of the country and or Mexico City and some international destinations, one of the easier ways to be accepted is to be the kid that people want to pick for a team. The challenge, of course, is every city's got different sports that they like. So that meant become a generalist in sports, baseball in one city, basketball in another, football in a third, skiing up in Tahoe. So got the advantage of trying lots and lots of different things. And that became part of something that still is with me today. It's my calming thing in life. Get a morning workout in and I actually am set for the day. So life is absolutely chaotic. We got to ground ourselves in the things that we can control. Wound up getting through high school and college, like all of us, hit the job market, eager to try and find something exciting to do. I was interviewing in 1987 when the economy was actually taking a negative turn in the US. And I was lucky enough in that series of interviews, because most of the doors were shut, to bump into Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture, and actually get time with the partners that were driving the computer consulting, the coding division. So I started my life as a coder. And the core draw for me as I spent more time thinking through what was it that Anderson was doing for companies, was the realization that every period in history where there's a free flow of information, a free flow of data, good stuff tended to happen. Ages of enlightenment actually occurred. When you wanted to control a population and when the dark ages hit, take away the ability to read, make sure literacy isn't there, shut down avenues of communication. It's a great way to control a population. And my view in 1987, and it sticks with me through today, is technology applied properly is one of the greatest liberating forces for all of us as human beings. I moved from Accenture to Oracle and jumped into pre-sales and then inside sales. Quickly got the bug for startups. Back then in 1989 when I joined Oracle, they had just gone public and were roughly $600 million. I left at 1.2 billion because the company was way too big and they were probably going to slow down and stop growing. So that shows you how wise I was back then, as they've continued to take industry after industry. I went to a company called PowerSoft that had a next generation object-oriented development tool back in 89, 90, 91 that was on the Windows platform. And we got incredibly lucky to choose the right OS. We launched on Windows 2, and I don't know if you guys remember that didn't actually stay up. You had to reboot on a consistent basis. But beautiful product, beautiful GUI. We wound up getting bought by Sybase, and I left again and went to a startup called Patrol Software. It was part of the initial team there. Both of those draws were from people that I knew. My boss's boss at Oracle went to PowerSoft. My direct boss, Finney Smith, went to Patrol Software. That got bought by BMC within 3 years. And after 8 years of rich experience, I decided, obviously every company in the Valley does well. I got to start my own company. Why not be an entrepreneur and join in the wealth creation game? So in 1995, 96, started a company called Icarian. And a few really powerful lessons came from being a founding entrepreneur. If you think back to 95, 96, there was none of the infrastructure that we know today. We were lucky enough with the vision of Icarian. It was the idea was if the economy is an IP-based economy going forward, there's a ton of systems to control financial capital, manufacturing capital, and get efficiency out of those. But people are the core asset going forward and what's in our heads and our capability to actually contribute. So why couldn't there be an MRP-like system for the workforce? And now that the internet was here and the browser had just been commercialized and three-tier architectures were emerging, now we could actually get an application to everyone's desktop, every individual contributor, every manager. Great idea. The internet was exciting. We were lucky enough to raise, or actually probably unlucky enough to raise $100 million, which enabled us to rent data center space, buy equipment from every manufacturer that was necessary, build up racks that now are freely available in AWS, GCP, and Azure, build our own middleware, build our own workflow engines, build our own UI harnesses. So eventually, we could sell for a few bucks per user in a cloud-based model, a way to get visibility into your workforce. So 3 key lessons for me from that experience. 1, timing is absolutely everything. I had dubbed Icarian success factors 10 years too early at this point in time. We spent all of our money building all the infrastructure and trying to actually get to the point where we could deliver the value, the ultimate value that we were trying to deliver to the end user. The second, that so many of us know innately now, that overfunding is a curse. If we had not been able to raise that much money, I think we would have been more frugal and practical in what we delivered and how we delivered it. And the third, and it was the most poignant lesson for me, is don't let sales get in front of engineering. Undercommit and overdeliver. I was so customer-centric after 8 years of selling customers and listening to customers so intently, and we were cloud-based solutions that was supposed to be a one-to-many model, one tech stack to many customers, that I would promise different capabilities to each of the large customers that we got. And we were lucky enough to get 300 big accounts. The Schwabs, the AT&Ts, the Kaiser Permanentes of the world. And that created such a brittle product that it was really difficult for us to be agile and to pivot. And luck always is one of those important things in life. 2000 brought a whole different environment, and we were stuck with a product that couldn't adjust. So I applied those learnings to my next few roles. I sat back and thought, how do I make sure that I actually internalize these lessons and not just know them at a superficial level? So I did something that that none of my friends would have expected to do. I actually joined PeopleSoft as their head of product development for the HR apps division. I figured if you really want to learn how to make sure that engineering is done effectively and ensure that sales doesn't get too far in front of engineering, actually go manage the teams that build the products, which then led me to SAP after the PeopleSoft acquisition by Oracle, where I got to meet Sanjog, Vishal Sikka, and a whole host of incredibly successful and talented folks, with my focus there being much more on the operational analytics and end user delivery versus the transactive backbone that ABAP is so effective at delivering within SAP. Through a series of different steps, I wound up talking to Godfrey Sullivan in 2014 about the opportunity to come to Splunk. I entered as head of field, and a year and a half later, he was actually running a succession process and asked me to interview with the board as the internal candidate. And the board, hopefully wisely, awarded that to me. And my life has been relatively different since then. It's my first public company CEO role. And I felt at the time that I had a lot of learnings under my belt, having been in sales and marketing, in professional services and consulting, in engineering, been with big companies that were public, medium-sized companies, tiny little startups. That's a pretty good backdrop as far as diversity of experience and hopefully some wisdom gained along the way. The one piece I underestimated was, what is it like to be a public company CEO, where you're marked to market every single day, where the risks that you take are visible quarterly in the stock price and sometimes daily in the variations that we get to feel through that stock market. The way that I ultimately feel like I've started to get my hands around that is to go back to my roots as a youth and to have the journey and learning be the most important criteria for me and to ensure that it's the most important criteria for Splunk overall. We were lucky enough in this age and these days to be in an era of abundance. That wasn't always the case for humanity, but we are creating industries and opportunities at an expanding rate. That means that change is absolutely constant, and we get a choice every single day to adopt a fixed mindset or adopt a growth mindset. The delta with a fixed mindset being learning is helpful, but the opportunities in front of you are contained. Therefore, why iterate? Why take risk? Because the overall winnings and opportunities are limited and not growing or growing at an exponential rate. We've adopted a mantra within Splunk that I repeat over and over, and I believe it's the basis of evolution in humanity. You're either growing or you're dying. So what do you do to ensure that you are growing every single day? Homeostasis, I think, is a figment of people's imagination. There's constant adjustments that are necessary, which is the basis of so much of what we have all been dealing with in tech on agile methodologies and CI/CD frameworks and the next generation SRE capability within any of our cloud-based companies. So abundance versus scarcity, growing or dying. And the third mantra within Splunk is we've got to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Because for us to pursue the opportunity in front of us, we have to put all the eggs on the table every single day and risk them being taken away from us. But that's the only way that I know how to grow and to create something that's lasting and serves customers in an effective way. If I think about humanity, this is not much different as far as the evolution of expansion of thinking. For 60,000 years, we were hunter-gatherers living in small tribes of 50 to 150 people until we began to cultivate plants and animals to help us with the agricultural revolution that created a whole different landscape for our ancestors for the 8 to 10,000 year period that we're going through that revolution. The Industrial Revolution hit 400 years ago. If you go back to the agricultural mindset of the 1800s or 1850s and the creativity necessary within human beings to actually lean forward and take advantage of an expanding universe, 90+% of the world's population was involved in some form of agricultural production. That was the livelihood for almost everybody globally, and in less developed countries, that still is the primary source of employment and overall economic gain. So imagine being told in 1800 or 1850, hey, there's this great new revolution coming. It's all about the industrialization of labor. And the thinking is very different. We've got stock markets now where you bet on the future. There's got freely available credit so you can invest ahead of the curve. You don't have to prove everything through the day in, day out production of the limited capabilities of your land. Oh, and by the way, over the next 100, 150 years, we're going to go from 90+% employment in agricultural to less than 5% in the country that you live in. But don't worry, it's all going to work out. Everyone's going to have a job. They're going to be doing really, really valuable work. How many of us could have begun to imagine what those jobs could be? I know for me, even a few years ago, when I was watching my sons engage with YouTube gamer videos, it's like, why would you be watching somebody else play a game? And why are those guys trying to make a business out of just headset on a computer and talking through what they're doing in Minecraft or whatever the rage was at the moment? That's, for many of those guys, that's an $8 to $20 million per year activity. Our creativity is the one element that we can tap to continue to progress our species, and often is the blocker when massive shifts are occurring. And this data revolution that we're in now is, I think, the most impactful, most interesting, and one of the highest growth shifts that any of us get to go through. I know that the agenda today covers a huge array of topics around this data revolution. For me, it's grounded in this orientation of abundance. Splunk obviously deals with big data. We're a platform for the overall management and ultimately, hopefully, insight and effective action around big data. Data is growing at an exponential rate. Every single industry, we've been talking about digitization and what it means to become a digital enterprise. Every single industry now, I think, fundamentally is grokking that we are living in a sense and respond world across even the least automated environments. And if we don't know how to tap streams of data that are being broadcast from everything in the world around us and harness the insights of those data that data provides, those organizations or those people are going to be left behind. And when I think about the world around us, every problem at this point is a data problem. Decoding the genome is a data problem. Beginning to influence future characteristics and capabilities of humans is a data problem. The environmental issues we're facing, ultimately, foundationally, are data problems. How are we going to get to autonomous driving? Data problem. So data is the foundation of the future of our economy, and I'm sure there'll be a revolution beyond the data revolution that most of us are not creative enough to actually wrap our minds around at this point in time. But I think for most of us would see that this data revolution is still in its infancy. While computing's been around since the 50s and 60s, the bulk of the systems that we're dealing with were focused on transactive and sparse interactions. The past 10 to 15 years are when the data revolution portion actually began to truly take off. And if it's anything like the revolutions before us, we've got decades and potentially centuries to actually continue to specialize and gain value out of what is possible in this data revolution. To do that, again, going back to that growth mindset, requires constant iteration, the willingness to fail always. Failure is the inseparable twin of innovation. If you're not experimenting, it's not truly an experiment, and experiments don't always work out. The majority of experiments actually don't work out, but that's how we build the basis for future successes. And as most of us know, data is changing different industries and opportunities and activities that you wouldn't naturally associate with data. Billy Beane has made the data analysis in Major League Baseball a commonly understood element now. And actually, other teams have taken it to a level that he didn't imagine, or are using it as the weapon to win titles. But simple manual interactions like airports are being completely revolutionized by data. We were lucky enough to have the leader, the COO of Dubai Airports, join us at our user conference a few months ago, Michael Libbitson, where he walked through how they're harnessing data to change every single aspect of the airport, from helping to direct people and employees to security lines so that you keep those to a minimum and they're able to hit their goal of everyone through security in 5 minutes or less, to ensuring safe Wi-Fi access and the highest quality and high-speed Wi-Fi of any airport internationally, to ensuring clean bathrooms. They have a golden bathroom rule where they're splunking all data, all activity of entry and exit of bathrooms and usage of facilities within bathrooms to give an indicator of when a bathroom might need service, so that in an airport, everybody has a high quality experience, even down to the restrooms that they'll be using. The opportunities are absolutely infinite to completely disrupt and upend any business process, any industry, any activity that any human being engages in. And I actually believe it's going to be critical and necessary to do that if we want to continue to support the 7.5 billion people we currently have today and the 12 to 15 to 20 billion people that we predict will be here in the coming years. And I know for me, I'm faced with a choice, and I have debates all the time with folks on, do you choose to be optimistic or pessimistic? With something like AI and ML coming down the pike, is that complete annihilation and disaster for humanity, or is it a benefit for humanity? With all the disruptions that we're seeing politically and in different economies and different companies, is that a benefit or a negative? And for me, I can't help but be optimistic. The problems that we are going to solve, I think, will boggle all of our minds and provide a better life and better capability for humans. In the short term, there may be some less beneficial things that are happening, but the long-term trend, I think, is positive and up and to the right. And there's got to be a lot of thought to make sure that we're doing it in a way that helps people versus hurts people. So Splunk. It was founded in 2005 to solve a pretty simple but difficult to actually master problem. How do you do effective root cause analysis when an IT system has failed? Usually, that root cause analysis is an investigation of data that's between the seams. It's not a mystery that a database has rolled over, or a server has died, or a storage array has failed. The mystery is, how did that happen? What were the steps leading up to that, and how do you attack that root cause so that you're not just rebooting and hoping it doesn't happen in the future? To get that done, we built a platform that, to this day, I think is difficult to equal because of the design approach and architecture that we took. Which is, if you really want to do an investigative forensic platform, you cannot schematize the data. You do not know what question you're going to be asking of the data by the nature of the problem you're trying to solve. Each one of those incidents is a unique incident. The other core element that we did that I think is important in any data landscape is tie together the 4 pillars that I think are critical for a data solution in a very elegant and tightly coupled way. I look at those 4 pillars as finding, enriching, transforming, and moving data as the first pillar. Storing, managing, and optimizing data as the second pillar, playing with the data, and gaining insight and aha moments as the third pillar, and then an underutilized aspect that will actually explain why we bought a company called Phantom a few weeks ago, is taking action on the data. That's the output that I think all of us want as we are trying to become a more data-driven species and data-driven organizations. What actions should we be taking based on the multitude of different inputs that we're getting as we're playing with the data? Splunk has done a very effective job on the schemaless aspect of that, the investigative and forensic element. What we've been focused on the past 4 or 5 years is moving up the stack to semi-structured data. When you want to monitor something, when you want to detect, when you want to get into the predictive analytics realm, you do need to begin to structure that data. What we care about in that data side is the high volume, high variety, high velocity data that is part of that underlying framework on the investigative side. And that's part of what's enabled us to move into areas like security, incident, and event management as a category, or IT systems management and optimization. The combination of the underlying super flexible, non-schematized data with a high speed, high velocity, high throughput set of semi-structured data to do that monitoring, detective, and predictive capability. At this point, our bigger customers are ingesting 4 to 5 to 7 petabytes per day of data. We didn't think that was possible back in the pre-2010 era when one of those first customers challenged us to get a terabyte of data ingested per day. They blew through that and got to a petabyte 2 years ago. And the challenge I have in front of us at this point is, when can you manage an exabyte of ingest per day on a high performance basis and still provide insight and effective actions from that data. I view that AI and ML layer as an umbrella that cuts across all 4 pillars. Every pillar gets better because of machine learning and eventually some degree of artificial intelligence. And it gets better because of the interplay between each one of those layers. So when you look at something like collaboration, orchestration, automation on the back end of a decision set, being able to interrogate that action and understand how effective and efficient was it? Could it be improved in some way, and how would it be improved? Do you need to change your algos and correlations on the data set itself? Do you need to change the type of data you're going after, the structure of the data? Do you need to enrich in different ways? You have to go after different sources you didn't understand when you first were trying to solve that problem and take those first sets of actions. Splunk, because it's an open platform, has been applied in very unique ways. We started with an IT ops and root cause analysis basis, which led us into security and deep forensic analysis by security analysts, which then led us into app dev and ensuring that we have high quality code and builds are being done effectively, which then led us into all kinds of different line of business use cases as well. How do you optimize manufacturing process? How do you optimize elevator arrival rates in a building? And many nonprofits have started to benefit from Splunk as well. Going back to every core problem is a data problem. One that I was amazed by, I wouldn't have thought of this as a data problem until I spent a little bit more time with the organization, is the human trafficking issue. There's thousands of isolated silos of data that if you can bridge them with the right abstraction and then correlation layers, there's all kinds of signal and insight that you can get. But the difficulty is, how do you bridge a bunch of different data assets, many of which you don't have any ownership around? The Human Emancipation Network is on that journey, and they're starting to make a meaningful dent and impact in being able to track and eventually help authorities prevent something as far away from the initial use case of Splunk, of mean time to resolution for IT, as human trafficking. We have a foundation called Splunk for Good that I'm very proud of, that we set a goal a year and a half ago of giving away $100 million of software services and overall education to nonprofit institutions involved in all aspects of education, research, and actually delivery of services globally. And I'm proud that we're now almost $20 million into that goal, ahead of schedule, as we try and be in our growth rates as well. All right, so brave, bold future. I know you guys are going to spend a few more days here diving into lots of different aspects of how do we go beyond any limitations that we have in our mind to tap into a learning and growth mindset so that we can continue on the journey of believing that anything is possible, that we're able of accomplishing anything that we as a species or individuals set our mind to, as long as we're willing to work hard, keep an open mindset, be willing to constantly fail on our path to success. I know what we think about every single day at Splunk is, what problems do we want to help our customers solve, and how do we partner together to continue to expand the aperture of progress and benefit for all of us in this room and beyond. I'm really honored and excited to be part of this high-tech industry and to be here with you today, and I appreciate you taking the time to invite me. Thank you.